uh, improve, thank you, improve your kind of access to the people in the industry and give yourself the best chance of actually making a start. And then we're going to finish with a really good Q&A with two friends from PanMac, and they're going to be covering some nuts and bolts stuff about kind of entry-level jobs and whatnot, but also some broader questions about publishing, which might come in handy in interview settings and the like. Okay, so I am going to share my screen again, and I'm going to get up a CV. Here it is. Now, I hope everyone can see that in all of its glory. What I'm going to do is just be silent for about 30 seconds to give you a chance to absorb it, and then we will talk about it.
I'm laughing because it's actually better than some CVs that we've had through in past times.
Well, actually, I have to say that when I came back to it, I haven't looked at it for a little while. When I came back to it, I did think there were a couple of things that weren't terrible. Obviously, quite a lot.
I think the Insta handles, but not terrible.
Right. Okay. So what I would love right now is for people in the audience to, if you can spot something which you think that you would change about this CV, could you do I'm hoping that you have this facility, the digital kind of hand raise thing, which I think will bring you to the top of my interface. Do you have that even? Actually, I have a horrible feeling actually that this version.
Yeah, they do. If you go to where reactions are and click on reactions, there's the option to raise hand.
Thank you.
No problem.
Right.
You changed the font, Kat. Yeah, good. That's a good starting point, Kat.
Okay, so did that come through on the comments?
On the chat, yeah.
Yeah, so the font. So the font we've used here, or I've used here, is Comic Sans, which if you're a sort of a font snob or a graphic design snob, as I am, you'll recognize as a slightly sort of a font of limited seriousness. It's, I mean, you know, like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's just a font, who cares? But go for something a little bit more professional. It doesn't really matter what, but try to go for something that communicates a little bit more seriousness. Could be serif, could be sans serif, doesn't really matter. Now we've got a few things in the chat here.
Definitely. So Zainab said his single status is not required, so wouldn't want that. I think you're right, it's not a dating profile, so I think we're all right with whatever status you are, James. Yep, this is your fake CV. And it doesn't sound particularly professional with the contact details. And I think that's a really good point to make. So if I use my personal experience here, I started applying for jobs straight out of university, and for some reason I decided that my email address was wacky, and obviously it rhymes and it's great, but it's really not that professional. And I had to very quickly change it, and I started getting more responses. And I think you're taken a bit more seriously with a bit more of a grown up, in inverted commas, email. So contact details are really important. I would say Instagram probably isn't that relevant to your application unless you're applying for maybe a digital role or something like that. But Twitter, so you could swap out Insta for Twitter if you are active on Twitter. But if you're like me and you use your Twitter just to complain to customer services of various companies, then maybe don't need to use that. But contact details, I would say, don't put your address in. It's a GDPR nightmare from a very personal, selfish perspective. It doesn't matter anymore. I think as long as you've got a phone number, email address, you don't need much more unless it's relevant for your role.
Absolutely. Now, good question here from, or good observation here from Samantha, saying a list of skills acquired in each role would be helpful, because what I've put here is just a simple list of employment points. So Rocky, how much detail do you think you would suggest that people put in terms of skills?
So I think it depends on the number of roles you've had in the past. So me and Rena, who you will meet a little bit later, she's head of HR at PanMac, we were talking about this earlier, and it depends on the level of the role you're applying for, and also the skills you need for the role. So for example, if you're applying for an entry-level role, you might not have had office experience before, but you might have had retail experience, or you might have worked in a restaurant or with in a warehouse or something like that. And those skills, your skill isn't there working in a restaurant. Your skill is customer service. Your skill is managing difficult conversations. It's stock checking. It's comfortable with data. So you pull the skills out and you can list them, but also I would say list them in a way that's relevant to the job. So tailoring your CV to the role that you're applying for. So you almost use the skills, highlight them in your CV and say, customer service, managing difficult conversations, comfortable managing difficult conversations, and then expand on that again in your covering letter. So you're kind of rounding it all off and saying, I actually don't have office experience, but I have got lots of relevant experience, so I think you should give me a go. So skills, I think, are important. They appear less and less on CVs now because I think people put them into their covering letter or build it into the employment bit and the detail of their employment.
And
so yeah.
Would I be right in saying that, like, sometimes people are tempted to put in quite a long list of responsibilities in a job, which sometimes is a little bit unnecessary?
Yeah, I would say responsibilities is fine, but responsibilities tells me about your old job, not about what you did in your old job that's relevant for this job that you're applying for. So again, your CV might not go into that much detail, but you can refer back to that in your covering letter. So I know we're only looking at a CV here, but I would be very put off if somebody applied for a role and hadn't done a proper tailored covering letter, because that's really your time for your personality to come through, for your skills to shine. You know, that kind of connection you make with a manager or the business can come out ironically in publishing on a piece of paper. So I would say your CV should be tailored to an extent, but I would say your covering letter is your main tailored thing. There was a couple of interesting points about the personal statement here. So the personal statement that it tailors off, I think it's true, it does tailor off. But James, why don't you talk to me about why you think you'd put a personal statement into a CV?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was explained to me ages ago now, that you know, that was your sort of you know, a little bit of a shop window where you could try and summarize where you were at and what you wanted to do in kind of active sort of dynamic language. I don't know, I mean, maybe you think it sounds like maybe you might put some of that stuff in a covering letter instead.
Yeah, exactly. I think a personal statement's really good for like current status, reason I'm applying. So for example, this could be new graduate looking for first role within the publishing industry, or not even, just looking for a change in industry, looking to enter the industry, whatever that might be. Please see covering letter, or whatever that's. I don't think it needs to be taking up a chunk of your CV. And some of you might not have had lots of jobs, but once you get a little bit older, into like your late 20s and 30s, you've had a series of jobs, so your CV gets longer and longer and longer. So having a big personal statement in there is not that relevant. I think, me personally, I think I maybe skim a personal statement for the whole of 2 seconds. For me, it's about the work experience, the skills, and possibly even a little bit about if you're applying for an editorial role, your education a little bit, or what you've done around English or English literature, English language, that kind of stuff. But I dive straight into the covering letter. And actually, the way our recruitment system is set up, for Pan Macmillan at least, your covering letter comes through for managers to see before your CV. So for me, a covering letter is like your Oscar speech, maybe, kind of something like that. And then your CV is like your backup. So you said everything that you need to see. Someone can look at your CV and that can back up whatever you've referred to in your covering letter. So more and more, your CV is becoming almost like your COVID vaccine jab card, you know, like just proof I've got one, I'm a real person, these are the things that I've picked up, but you can learn more about me from my covering letter. So I think CVs have moved on. You can see it on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's become a bit more covering lettery and a bit more information about roles than it is just about I was here. So there's not to discredit them at all. I think they are valuable documents. I think you need to be intentional with how you use them.
Totally. Leader of Men isn't going down very well. I mean, I guess the main point here is you know, be conscious and sensitive about the language you use. I mean, that's, you know, yeah. I mean, that's obviously an extremely crass bit of old-fashioned sexism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Has anyone got any questions? You can ping your questions into the chat box or onto the Slido if you've still got that open. Cover letter type. So Zainab, for me, your cover letter suits your personality. So if you want to do it as like a table, blocks of text, however you want to do that, do it. We've had somebody submit one that was really interesting. They actually got quite far through a process. I'm not saying it was because of their covering letter, but it stood out and it was really to the point, and we found out lots of information about this person. They'd almost done in a graphic kind of way sticky notes on an A4 piece of paper with like, I did this is a statement about me, that I did this thing that's transferable to this role, why I deserve a chance for this job, why you should take a risk on me even though I've not worked in publishing before. So I think it's about bringing your true self out on the piece of paper, and we're hoping to start trialing giving people the option to submit a video covering letter or a voice note covering letter as well, not only to make our process a bit more accessible in terms of application processes, but also because introvert, extrovert, people come across differently on paper than they might do in real life. So hoping to give people a bit more of a chance to kind of get themselves across in those situations.
Sounds good. Observation here from Neeti saying the personal statement has several spelling errors. Absolutely. And there's too generic. Passionate about what? I think that's a really good point. You know, you want to tailor as much as you can. And really
about books, maybe.
Sorry?
Passionate about books, maybe.
Hey, it's a thought, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And also buzzwords. I thrive in diverse environments that allow for disruption across relevant and emerging platforms. You kind of get the impression that this person doesn't know what that meant, even as they were typing it. So try and avoid that. I think there's a temptation to try to impress with your language. But I imagine, Raka, you would agree with this, you know, keep it plain, keep it real.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And it's almost, this sounds really, for want of a better phrase, it's almost like a bit of a test before you've even started your job, because if you've not bothered to spell check, grammar check, make sure your sentences make sense in your CV and covering letter, it could look really, really good. And we could be deciding between two people to take forward. You are applying for a job in publishing. If your covering letter, forget publishing, any job, really, you should make sure you're doing this, but get a friend to read it, copy and paste it into a different Word document, or even to Gmail. Gmail have actually got a really good tracker for tone, so it tells you whether it's casual or formal, that kind of thing. But don't apply for a job in publishing if you've not properly grammatically checked your cover letter, CV, all of that kind of stuff, because it counts. You know, I've seen it happen. It's between two people. The person who's taken the time to check their covering letter and say that, then, you know,
yeah.
Kathy, just joined. Should GCSEs be on your CV? No, they can be, but we would assume if you've gone on to do A levels or university, you've probably got some kind of GCSE or O levels, or if that's what they used to be called.
And while we're on the academics, somebody pointed out that a partially completed course at Oxford Brookes University is going to raise questions. And actually, I would say that that's right. Be honest about it. If you did a course but didn't complete it, make sure that you're aware that if you do get an interview, that might come up, and sort of, you know, have your not have your story straight, but, you know, be prepared to have it queried and be able to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. If you don't, so hold on one second, the questions are coming.
There's a question about hobbies. I mean, I actually think the only good thing about this CV really is in the other section, because if somebody's actually taking action and they're blogging about contemporary poetry and they've self-published a poetry collection, to me, that's somebody that's actively engaged in publishing. They really care enough about it to do their own thing. So I would say make more of that. You know, really.
Yeah, like I think that outside of work stuff means a lot, and PanMac is, I know I keep coming back to PanMac, it's because I work here, obviously. But PanMac is very much a person-driven business. Like, we get editors being really successful because they have a particular taste in books, and that's who they've gone and acquired, or publishing directors that have a particular eye for poetry, so that's where they specialize. And that's come from a passion, but from also hobbies. So the stuff that you do, you've got a book review Instagram or a book review Twitter, talk about that stuff, because we like to know who we're meeting. It's not all about the formal paper education, I can write a good covering letter, it's about you.
Yeah.
Amy, you asked a really good question. If you don't know the name of the person to address the covering letter to, what is the best thing to do to put at the start of the letter? If in the advert, the hiring manager isn't named, don't email HR, the recruitment inbox, saying, who should I address the covering letter to whom this may concern, to the Picador team, to the PAN team, to the MCB children's team. Whatever feels natural without a name. I would say it's a little bit of a myth that covering letters have to be so formal, so they are dear and yours sincerely. If that's your style of speaking, that's your style of addressing people, fine. But you're also applying to a job for a person that you might eventually meet. They're a person who, you know, publishes books, has people working under them. So they're not going to be as formal as that in their day-to-day life. So you want to be able to connect with somebody through a covering letter. So do what feels natural to you would be my advice there.
Elena's question about how far back do you need to go in writing about your education. I think we slightly touched on that with the do you include your GCSE questions, but I mean, I don't know, for an entry-level job, I mean, is there really a rule for it? I mean,
not necessarily. I would say your A-levels could, instead of being one after the other, you could just have them in a line across, just to kind of make your CV a bit more distinct. Yep. And with future studies as well, if you have been accepted onto a course that hasn't started yet, put that in. You might get asked about how you would manage a job along with studies, so be prepared to kind of talk about that. Even if it's not something that you believe is that relevant for what you're applying for. For example, if you're doing further studies in, I can't even think of anything, English as a second language, to be able to teach people or another language or whatever that may be, teaching or something like that, that is very relevant to a job, I think, because you learn so many skills around that, around communication, around clarity, all of those kinds of things, and they're all relevant in all roles, I would say. I was told not to put either, I was told to put either a specific name or dear company name, recruitment team. Yeah, that's fine. Aurora, I hope I've said your name correctly. That is fine too. I would say if it's not available in the advert, dear company, dear recruitment team, dear hiring manager is totally fine. Absolutely. Yeah, I covered this earlier. Don't put your address on your covering letters. And if you want to put the company address, that's fine if you're writing a formal letter, but our recruitment system is a type in a box, so you wouldn't necessarily be able to put in an address for the company anyway. So I think it depends on how you're applying. Different platforms have different ways, different companies have different expectations. So get to know the personality of the company you're applying to as well before you do those things. James, do you know, or in your experience of hiring people, what are the best things that you've seen on a covering letter that you've kind of been like, that's excellent?
For me, the thing that always stands out is evident commitment to and sort of understanding of the role. If somebody's obviously done their research, you know, and they're really making an effort to show that they understand what the role is and what the company needs, I find that terribly impressive. Yeah, because it just shows commitment, and it means that, you know, they can sort of excel at the task of finding out about the job apart from anything else. Yeah. So I find that very very sort of attractive.
Definitely. With this CV, you have put your 2014 paper round in. On reflection, would you keep that in?
I think maybe that's going maybe too far back, but I'm going to stand with I'm going to back up the Zenith Windows one, because I did actually do that job. God, it was horrible. But actually, I'm pretty sure I did put that on my CV for my first publishing job, simply to show evidence that I could stick at something grim and that actually I could sell stuff, because I actually wasn't that bad. God, yeah, I'm getting horrible flashbacks.
It's something grim. I promise the publishing industry is not as grim as.
What am I trying to say?
What you were saying.
Evidence of resilience. Evidence of resilience, I think, is what I'm trying to go for. Anyway.
That's a good So I feel like we've steered a little bit into covering letter territory. Do we have a little bit of time to kind of dip into that a little bit?
Yeah, why don't we give ourselves 3 or 4 minutes if you want to just kind of give us a few tips on covering letters.
Belinda, it would be good to see more specific successes in the CV, like a good review of the poetry. Yeah, that's a really good tip. Thank you, Belinda. So for everyone that doesn't know, Belinda is our Macmillan Children's Book publisher. I want to say managing director of Macmillan Children's Books. So Amy had asked a question about covering letters. Let me just read this out. So, how much should I talk about my skills and myself compared to my knowledge of the company I'm writing to the covering letter? I'm always worried about not mentioning the company enough. So we would assume that you know enough about the company because you're applying for the role. So my tip there is always, if you're talking about the role enough in your covering letter, that kind of ties in the company too. So something along the lines of, I'm really interested to work at Pan Macmillan. I understand that this is one of the big 4 publishers in the UK and that you've won Publisher of the Year. Someone's going to tell me off. I can't remember, 3 times in the last 5 years. Rena or Belinda will have to correct me on that after, if that's not right. But it should be on our website. And then I think you've alluded enough to why you want to apply to like an award-winning publisher. And then you go on to talk about how your skills in previous roles or from group work in university or from your apprenticeship or whatever that might be relates to the skills of the role. So if you're applying for a job, the best thing you can do is email and ask for a copy of the job description. You might not always get it, but if you do get it, you can really tailor your covering letter to talk about why you've got relevant skills for the role that's being advertised. I hope that answers your question, Amy. And Pat, to your point, I would say the more established you get in your career, the longer your CV would get. If you're applying for an entry-level role, I wouldn't expect that it's already more than a page. You can fit more stuff in it by doing things like where on this CV that James has got on the screen where it says English, history and economics, put them all on one line next to each other rather than different lines, almost like paragraph style. You'd take the address out, you would have your email address and phone number underneath where it says James Spackman at the top, just to kind of make a bit more room. Tilly, would you go into, oh, I've lost you. So would you go into detail about specific authors you enjoy from the publisher to show knowledge? If you think it's relevant to the role, yes, but you need to save some things to talk about in an interview. So if you're applying for a role in children's, your covering letter might start, my favorite children's book when I was growing up was this for this reason, and because of how this book made me feel, I'm applying for a role in children's. So you can kind of drop things in there and bring it back to why you're applying for a role, but do save some stuff or keep some stuff up your sleeve for a CV. What do you think about the use of colour in a CV, Misha? I think it's fine. I think it helps your CV stand out a little bit. And I think, especially where we are part of the creative industry, use your creativity. I think it's
absolutely. On that note, Raki, I think we should probably wind up, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, everyone.
If we get a chance, we might try to find it. We'll just go back through that chat and just see if there's anything that we missed. If there is, I'm sorry. We'll try to go back to that and kind of respond to some of the
yeah, and I'll do some stuff. I think we're sending out an FAQs
yes.
afterwards as well, so I can try and do some written responses to those as well.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you very much, Raki. Okay. Time for me to get in amongst some routes into publishing. Because obviously, well, hopefully you've all seen on the material on the web link that we circulated in advance of this course, we gave you a little bit of a rundown of some of the established ways into publishing, trying to sort of pick through what the difference is between an internship and work experience, and talking about graduate schemes and other sort of schemes, and some of those nuts and bolts. So this stuff is a little bit more kind of informal, just kind of tips on, a lot of it is about kind of organizations to follow, really, because it's really important that you give yourself sort of every chance of getting warned about good jobs coming up, and just basically being kind of educated about the industry. So trade organizations and networking is what we're calling it. First things first, follow the Society of Young Publishers, and even join them. It's quite cheap. I can't remember what the exact fee is at the moment. Even if you don't want to commit to actually joining the Society of Young Publishers, do at least follow them on social. They've got various kind of regional bits, as you know, like London, North Scotland. Anyway, there's one in Oxford, but there's also kind of like a national organisation. It's a combination of job seekers in publishing and people who are junior in the publishing industry already. They do lots and lots of good online events, and I'm sure they'll start to do physical meetings again soon. And they do go out of their way to share information that will be useful for job seekers in publishing. Book Machine, this is another membership organisation. It may or may not be relevant to you. I mean, there's a lot of people who are subscribers to Book Machine who are already established in the industry. It kind of started off being mainly oriented towards tech. It was a time when people were kind of getting their heads around ebooks and enhanced ebooks or whatever. Now it's a lot broader. They've actually got a terrific kind of education program, which is called Campus. I would suggest that it's worth, again, probably following them on Twitter at the very least, and checking out what they do. Go onto their website and see what there is for free, because they are a really great source of information. Pub interns, I think they've changed their Twitter name since they were having a big row with One World about unpaid internships. But the purpose of the Pub Interns Twitter feed is simply to broadcast information about internships, but they also act as a little bit of a pressure, like a pressure group, because they are rightly angry about people who don't pay interns, so they get on their case, and quite right too, but very worth a follow. Publishers Association, it's the official industry body. It might seem a little dry, their website looks really boring, but actually have a dig around in the website and you will find quite a lot of sort of resources. I know anything called a resource makes it sound really boring, but there is some good stuff on there, and so I would have a dig around in there. The Bookseller, I mean, this is really obvious. It is really the only trade magazine, the only magazine for the industry. Absolutely follow them on social media. They've got various different accounts. One is just for their news, and you can sign up for a free newsletter as well. And that's great just for getting kind of industry information if there's mergers going on or sort of disputes. Also big bestsellers, big auctions, like an author moves from, like a famous author moves from one publishing house to another. Really great just for general background understanding about what's going on, in a kind of quite topical, quite kind of, minute to minute sort of way. The Bookseller also has this organization called Future Book. I say organization, it's sort of like an entity. It's all built around an annual conference, which again was started particularly to look at tech and like the future of the technology of publishing. That's again sort of broadened out as everybody has got their heads around how to make an ebook or whatever. But it continues to be mainly focused on sort of innovation in publishing. I can't remember how much it costs, but the actual conference itself is really expensive. But I do think they get volunteers to go along and sort of help man the event, and that's a good way to kind of get involved. And you can, again, they have their own special Twitter feed for Future Book, so you can follow that too. Creative Access is well worth being aware of. They're a brilliant organisation. They arrange internships in the creative industries, and they're very kind of forward thinking and sort of constructive in terms of their recruitment policy. They're really they are there to kind of provide a good example about how to recruit ethically. So I would absolutely check them out for for actual job recruitment purposes and for internships too. Now, does anybody know what this I can't believe I'm sharing this slide. Please get in the chat or raise your hand if you know what this building is. I never did. But it's the Stationers' Company. So it's one of these ancient guilds in the city of London with a guild hall, which is centuries old. And it happens to be Thank you, Jason. It's not Buckingham Palace. Oh, somebody actually got that correct. Anyway, Stationers Company. So, as you may be aware, there are these historic guilds, and various industries are connected with various guilds. The Stationers Company is kind of like the official guild, which covers publishing. What's the relevance of this in the modern world, you may ask? Well, actually, they do have quite a lot of schemes, which are quite sort of enlightened and progressive, to help people get into the industry. So they do grant schemes, they help with accommodation and stuff. Again, it's not always easy to find and access that stuff, but actually, all the more reason to get in amongst it and actually see what's there for you. I mean, it is it's a lot more open at an organization than it might immediately appear. Okay, a few specific ones for specific disciplines. The Book Marketing Society is for people who are in marketing departments. They're great. You can follow them on Twitter, and that's particularly good if you're applying for marketing jobs, because they'll tweet their prize winners and they'll say, okay, this quarter we've got our marketing awards and these are the campaigns that won. So that will give you an immediate snapshot of the kind of best practice in marketing at the moment. Who's doing what with campaigns, what the kind of creative is like. And the equivalent organization for publicity is the Publishers Publicity Circle, which I always struggle to say, but it's a really, really good, really well-run organization. And they kind of spread the word about excellence in publicity. It's not quite the same thing, but if you're interested in production, I 100% recommend Prod Squad Books on Instagram, which is just, I don't know, it's just an unbelievably enthusiastic account, all about the joy of foil, about exciting bindings, about colored page endings, about all sorts of things that production departments do. And it really brings to life the joy of that job. So I love them. I think they're great. Now, a bit of a self-plug here, because if you do end up getting an internship or work experience in London, when the kind of physical ones are open back up, and you don't know anyone in London who you can stay with, the Spare Room Project, which I started a couple of years ago, is here to help, because the point of the Spare Room Project is to introduce people doing that to people already in publishing who have either a spare room or a sofa or somewhere for you to stay. And basically all you need to do is go onto the website and fill in an application form, and then hopefully Spare Room Project will be able to match you with somebody who'll give you free accommodation, thus taking away a bit of a financial barrier. There is also an online sort of offshoot to that, which is the Spare Zoom Project. So you can go onto the same website and sign up for a 30-minute free sort of mini mentoring session with somebody who's already in publishing. So you might go on there and say, oh, I want to get into cookbook publishing, how do I do it? Or, like, I'm really struggling with my ambitions to be a book publicist, how can you kind of help me? Or can you look at my CV, that sort of thing. And we'll try to match you with somebody that's relevant to that, to the thing that you're trying to do. I'm going to say a few things about networking, and I'll do these really quickly. Ask for advice. Most people in the industry are only too happy to be asked for advice. They might realize that you've got a bit of a hidden agenda, which is, I want a job. Generally speaking, that's okay. You've got to be a little bit targeted about who you do this with. I mean, if you were to kind of email the managing director of a company and say, hey, can I take you out for a coffee and ask your advice about careers? They might not, respond, but then they might. If you're a bit more targeted about it, say where you were to kind of get in touch with, I don't know, like a key account manager at a big publisher and say, I'm interested in a career in sales, can I ask you about it? They might be flattered enough to say, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. Go to events, see if you can find free online events, just to get the sense of how books are kind of promoted and talked about, just to kind of get yourself into the environment. I think it's a really free, easy and free way to do it. Keep your horizons wide. A lot of people have mentioned this already. Don't just kind of go for one department, one discipline. It is possible to move around. So, do sort of keep your antennae on. It's always be curious. That actually sounds really cheesy. That seemed okay on the page, but it's kind of cheesy when I say it out loud. Oh, and be systematic. I think this is a really important thing, because it might feel like we've got a really big, confusing industry here and I've got no chance of ever finding my way through. But actually, make a big list on a spreadsheet, why not, of all of the companies and all of the imprints that you would work for. And just think, right, do I know anyone in any of them? Have I had any contact with any of them? Do I have an in? And then as you start to get those contacts, if you have a kind of a back and forth with somebody at Dorling Kindersley somehow, or if you meet somebody from HarperCollins, you might say to them, look, could you introduce me to somebody at Faber? You know, and then you can kind of make your contacts multiply, but make sure that, you know, you've got like a next action for every single one, even if it's just do more research on these people. And yeah, Rocky's just pointed out, if you don't have an interact with them on social media, be in the conversation with them. You know, people do, publishers love it when people respond to their posts on social. And I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes about internships when we do start having you know, proper internships again, making the most of them. You might be shocked by the first one, because actually I think you should make the tea, not because you are a dog's body. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Because actually, if they've invited you to be in a department, in a workplace, there's people make tea for one another. That is kind of like colleague behavior. You know, try to take your place, as it were, you know, in the team, and actually kind of interact with people, and you know, and be you know, be a colleague for the short amount of time you have. Ask questions. You know, obviously don't pester people, but generally speaking, if somebody young and keen comes up to a person in publishing and says, oh, I just noticed you were doing that. What is that all about? You know, that they will take the time to explain it and to engage with you. Don't get exploited. If you feel like you know, it's going wrong, like, you know, it's actually that you feel that you are being exploited or taken advantage of, you know, go to HR, go to the person that hired you and gave you the internship, and, you know, and take action immediately, because nobody needs that. But commit. I mean, generally internships and work experience, you know, you will be doing some basic stuff. Most people have done that at some point. Most people have stuffed envelopes. I was going to say photocopied things. That's almost a thing of the past now. Most people will have done a bit of data entry on grids and stuff like that. So yeah, prepare yourself for a bit of that. But you know, if you work hard, hopefully you'll get some of the more fun stuff as well. Now I realize I'm rattling on. There's a few comments building up in the chat. Jason doesn't like tea. Right, fantastic. Thanks for your input, mate. Okay, I am going to put a stop to this and do our next section, which is a Q&A with Belinda, Macmillan Children's Books Managing Director, and Rena, Head of HR, and my colleague Jason, who's a third of the BKS agency, and he's also Chief Executive of Midas, which is a PR company you may have heard of. So I would like to invite Belinda, Rena, and Jason to start your video and unmute and hello. And I think what I'll do is stop screen sharing and put everyone on gallery view. Now, we've got some questions from the Slido, and I've also got a couple of general questions about the industry. Now, during the course of this, if anybody wants to ask an additional question, I know we haven't managed to tempt you to actually unmute and ask a question, but I would love it if you use the reactions button to raise your hand, and I will absolutely come to you and invite you to unmute, and we can hear your question live. If you're not comfortable with that, absolutely put it in the chat. That's fine too. So I am going to find the questions that I was going to ask you. Now, the first question, actually, I'm going to direct this to Rena because it relates to entry-level roles, and particularly, well, this is about entry-level editorial roles. The question is, what experience do you need to secure an entry-level editorial role? Lots of job specs say you don't need publishing experience, but what do you need? So Rena, maybe you can tell us about experience for entry-level roles, particularly editorial. Rena, can you hear me? Oh, I think you might still be on mute. Oh, that's strange. You don't appear to be on mute, and yet I can't actually hear you. That's really peculiar. Okay, maybe if I try a different question directed to Belinda or Jason while you have a play around with your audio settings. It always goes wrong just at the wrong moment, doesn't it? A more general question. Actually, I think I might ask you about culture. Belinda, I'm really interested in the way that publishing companies' cultures change over time. And a lot of people, are very complimentary about the working culture at Pan Macmillan. Maybe you could give us your sort of sense of what the working culture is like there, maybe, and compare it and contrast it with what you perceive to be the norm in publishing.
Can you hear me? Yeah, good. We are a very collaborative company, which is brilliant, and it's something people tell us. So it's not something I'm saying. People come in and work for us and they say, gosh, it's really truly collaborative here. We say we put people first, and I think that's really true. And Rina and Raki, of course, also play a big role there, because if somebody has got a problem or an issue, I think we really try to be supportive. We try to say yes first, always. We try to be constructive about things. And then I think I wanted to sort of mention what I feel about the culture also in children's, and if I can go into that. So I think you know that I wrote something about this for Book Machine, but I mentioned, so I grew up in Denmark. And in Denmark, we have a something called the Jante law, the law of Jante, which is a Viking law, or maybe not so much a law as a set of norms that all Danish children grow up with. And it's really integrated in all Danes, I think. And this set of norms say that you always put society first, and you don't boast about your achievements, and you shouldn't get jealous of other people. And I think it's really important to remember that as a leader, you're not superior in any way. You're just very fortunate that you've been put in charge, or not even, I hate words like that, but you're fortunate that you're able to work with a bunch of really talented people. And your job is not to give them lots of, the directives of do this, do that. Your job is actually to be an enabler and facilitator and coach and consultant, and to try and just really help this group of people to operate to the maximum of, to really use all of their capabilities. And I think, it's a very Danish concept, but I've found a lot of that in Pan Mac. I think there's a lot of this enabling culture that we are there to help and support. And we get our results by working together. And if there is a problem, we try and help and resolve that.
That sounds incredibly, sensible and progressive. And yeah, I want to work there too now. Now, I think Rina has had to do a bit of leaving and rejoining in order to get back on the call. So Rina, can you hear us, and would you like to try to unmute and talk?
She's currently typing to me, so
still struggling. Okay,
I might start the answer to that question. Can you just repeat it?
So the question was,
I can wing it better.
Yeah, of course. What experience do you need to secure an entry-level editorial role? And you might want to, widen that out into other entry-level roles. Lots of job specs say you don't have publishing experience, but what do you need?
I can pitch in a bit, Raki, if you want to.
Yeah, of course. You just need to be a person, I would say, that's interested in reading books and likes reading books. The industry has, in the past, been a bit based on nepotism, and there's been a huge shift away from that, I would say, in the last 5 to 7 years. So for me, it's about having a passion for books, being able to articulate yourself well, and being a good communicator and getting across your skill set. So like I said, you could have been working in a restaurant, you could have worked in retail, you could have worked in a warehouse, could have worked at the student union. I worked at my student union bar And I learned resilience and patience through doing that. And so I told my employees about that, because the student union bar is not that fun, because students that want a drink are not that fun. But you have all these skills that you just need to be able to articulate and communicate really well. So you could have been to the moon, and if you don't explain that journey very well and how you got there, you're probably not going to, you know, be given the same opportunities. So it's about getting your personality across, being articulate, being creative with your application, and saying, I know that I don't have the experience that you might be looking for. However, this is what I do have that I think can be relevant for the role. And I suspect Rena's unmuted as well. I heard a bit of noise. But Belinda, did you have anything to add to that one, you think?
Yeah, no, yeah, I thought you said it perfectly, actually, and you covered a lot of the things I was going to say. I was just going to refer back to James's CV, and what I felt was lacking a bit there was that it was just a list of things that you had done. But what's really important is to try and pull out of those what you learned from it. So if you worked in the canteen, as Marky said, and you learned to be patient and service orientated, or whatever it was, then pull that out, because it doesn't matter whether you got experience in the specific area of publishing. What really matters is what have you learned in other, you know, other experiences you've had in life.
Absolutely.
And get some successes across. Can you put some successes in your CV, even if they're crazy successes? You know, I once got a CV where this was a young Dutch woman, and she put in her CV that she had actually won the Dutch championship for walking on stilts. I thought that's really, I mean, I thought that was super impressive, right? And it did show something about her. Yeah. She got the job.
You absolutely can't not interview somebody like that, can you? You just need to ask.
No, and that the skills that shows, patience, practice, and get up from a fall, quite literally, probably. You know, there's the skills that apply from playing netball at uni, casually playing football with the lads at the weekend, or not, whoever you're playing football with. They are all skills that are transferable, and the way you communicate them is your way in, I would say.
Absolutely. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and put a slightly more big picture, strokey beard kind of question to Jason right now. And it's kind of about the industry. And Jason, how healthy do you think the future of books and publishing is looking? How sort of confident do you think we are in the industry and its future?
Yeah, great question. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason. I would say, you know, publishing, I've been in publishing since 1996, 97, crossing both New York and London for big publishers and for small publishers and everything in between. And every sort of 5 years, it seems like the industry has a bit of a crisis where they think, oh my God, we're about to be out of business. Something's going to hit us. Something's happening. The big ones, you know, in our lifetime would have been ebooks. When ebooks first came out, it was a bit of a wild west because we had no idea whether, you know, you could always look back and see, okay, for James Patterson crime novel print books, they always sold about 50,000 in print, and we can sort of estimate that for the next book. But when ebooks came out, it just sort of skewed everything, and no one knew exactly where it was going to land. So it took a few years for the market to kind of readjust itself to where now it's kind of pretty much a sort of stable number of what sells in e versus print for the most part. So I think looking at COVID and other things that kind of always crop up, sometimes in the industry is a little bit of like our hair's on fire. Oh my God, we're about to be put out of business, the way the music industry was sort of, you know, albums and CDs were sort of marginalized by the digital stuff. But actually, I think what we've proven over and over and over again is that people love stories, they love content, and they love to have that content in any kind of format we can deliver it. So if we do a fancy ebook and it has a bit of video and it's in shorter bite-sized things and people can read on their iPhone or on an iPad or on their computer, then great. We can have authors who write stories for that. So I think to me, and I have to say this because this is my business, otherwise I might as well quit now, but I'd say we're in a good position. I think we've proven time and again, especially during COVID when book sales kind of went up, that you know, when times are tough, people still turn to books and stories for kind of comfort.
Belinda, from a children's point of view, would you share that degree of optimism?
Yeah, Yes, I certainly would. The point about publishing being quite resilient, it was resilient with the digital crisis that really hit the music business industry so hard, and it's been resilient during a pandemic. I've got some, from a children's perspective, I've got some concerns, but I also got, there are also things I feel very positive about. I am concerned that the way that the government in the UK are not supporting libraries. I think that's a really big issue. We know from research that libraries are often the first point of sort of entrance, like this is where children get in touch with books. This is where they first encounter books. Particularly important, of course, if they don't have books at home. We know that 380,000 children in the UK don't own a book, which is outrageous for one of the richest countries in the world. So that concerns me. It concerns me that in that, in that situation, the government is not doing more. In fact, they're doing worse. They're closing down libraries. I'm also concerned about the school system that doesn't really support reading for pleasure. It's a school system that's all about testing and exams, and I feel like teachers are forced into putting content into boxes, and I think that must be very demotivating for young people, and that passion for reading is really it's not there any longer. And again, it's not the teacher's fault, it's simply the government. However, I am, having said all of that, having gotten that off my chest, I feel very, very, well, I think it's a great shame that we haven't been publishing properly for a very long time, because we clearly have only been publishing for a small slice of the market. But I think we are now aware of that, and I think we have a real opportunity to make our books more representative of more children and to reach more children. And that fills me with, I feel so positive about what can be achieved there. So I think,
sure,
yeah.
Sure. And hopefully if we have time, we might just quickly come back to issues of representation. I do want to just ask a question, and this will be again a slightly more brass tacks one for Raki and Rina, if she's managed to reconnect, because two questions that we had in the Slido touched on this. Advice for people from the EU who want to work in publishing in the UK, but also in the chat just now we had a question about again, just non-UK citizens,
Yeah.
what your chances are and what the practical implications are.
So if I'm being completely honest, the pandemic has kind of meant that whatever goes, if you want to go and work in Italy for 6 months, go and do that kind of thing. I have not had a situation where I've had to kind of look into how that might work, and I'm not kind of a visa work regulations kind of expert. Your first port of call would just be check out the UK like working criteria now, because they changed, or they are changing to a bit more of a points-based system, which makes it a little bit easier. I don't know that it's as easy for entry-level roles, but before we used to have to prove that there's nobody in the UK that could do a job to get sponsorship, etc. But I haven't honestly read enough into it. But what I will do is I'll try and have a look for the FAQs, and if I can share some information or at least some links for people to kind of have a look at, because each individual situation is really individual. So I'm going to kind of be a bit political and neutral with that answer, because I don't know yet, sorry.
The only thing I'd add to that is that we do need applicants from other countries. So for example, I don't know whether this week you've talked about selling rights, but we have so everyone knows what that means. We sell rights to our books to publishers around the world. And for those roles, we need people ideally that speak languages. And it's really, really perfect if you got somebody selling to Germany and they are German, because then they know the market, or if they've got experience with the market. So it is something we want to resolve. We don't want to stop employing people from outside. We just need to get our heads around the rules, and there are lots of things that have changed since Brexit.
Absolutely. A final question, I think, really, before we need to wrap up. Is the industry genuinely getting more diverse, both in terms of its creative output and also its its workforce. Belinda, what do you think about that? Reasonably briefly, if you can.
Sorry, I was completely distracted from something in the
Sorry,
chat.
don't worry.
No, that's fine. Is publishing is the workforce getting more diverse?
And the creative output, the books and the workforce.
We are trying really, really hard now, but I'm sure a lot of people in the audience today would say you're not being quick enough. But we're trying really hard, both in terms of publishing more by creators of color, and children's has done quite well. I think our percentages now, we went from it's embarrassing. We've only done well because our percentage was low, but I think we are up nearly around 20% now, which is great, which was up from 5% in a couple of years. So it's possible, and we are continuing, and some excellent projects out there. And also in terms of hiring, we are making a real effort.
Absolutely.
And from a people perspective, I would say the industry hasn't been open to people from more diverse backgrounds in the past. So there's not lots and lots of senior people and lots of diverse senior people in positions in businesses that are traditional publishing roles. So you can be in finance, you can be in HR, you can be in, support services kind of roles, and maybe be somebody from a more diverse person of color, I would say, in that situation. But where now the industry is opening up and is being more accessible from entry level, over the next few years, we'll start seeing these people come up through the ranks and come up through the industry. So it's really important to not be put off with how it is now, but put yourself in the position of change. And you want to be there because your opinions are valid. Being a person of color, somebody from a diverse background, is something that is important to you because that was missing from your childhood. I couldn't find a book that represented me when I was young. Not that it was me that was looking, but my parents couldn't find a book for me that represented me when I was young. And I'm not that old. I'm only 31. So we've come a good way in a short period of time. But the industry is motivated, and we are working really hard internally to make sure we have the right structures to support people from more diverse communities and from backgrounds that aren't traditionally, or from backgrounds that it's not traditional for you to work in an office or in a creative industry. You've had pressure to become a pharmacist or a doctor, or you're doing something that's a bit wild to your family. We're putting things in place to support you properly, and we're trying to make London more accessible too, from a class and regional diversity perspective as well. So I can harp on about this for hours, but you've got 2 minutes. I'm gonna
Well, and in fact, we're probably going to wrap up there, I think, because I think Jessica is going to jump on and just round things up. But thank you very much. And Rena, I'm so sorry that you had tech problems there, because I know that you had lots of things to say, and that's just really bad luck. But thank you, Raki. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Belinda. And Jessica, would you like to join us?
I am going to wrap up, but before I do, I'm going to very, very quickly answer. I've just come on to see Sarah's question about marketing, about entry-level roles. Sarah, absolutely don't feel, if you've got really transferable skills at a higher level, you absolutely could go in at that level. Don't feel that you, actively somebody might be like, well, you're too experienced for what we're looking for. So don't be afraid to go in at a higher level for sure, because you will have such important transferable skills. And actually, having been in that position where I was hiring people like that, I would be grabbing you with both hands, because if you're coming from outside of book marketing, you're going to know a lot of stuff that we maybe have got set in our ways about. So yeah, don't hold back on that at all. Anyway, that's not what I came on to say. I came on to say a massive, massive, massive thank you. But before I do that, I want to let you know that you have had a survey emailed to you from the lovely people at Eric. Sam has just sent that out to you. So please make sure you check your inbox and fill in that survey for us to let us have your feedback, so we can carry on making this as brilliant and as helpful as we possibly can. You are also going to get from Sam a video from Raki, who she made a little walkthrough video of the office, so that's going to come your way as well. And then before I say thank you I say thank you to everyone, obviously, particularly Belinda and Rena, who were on today, as well as all of our other speakers all of this week, James and Jason, Eric, Raki. but mostly to all of you for showing up, because actually we were just before we jumped on, we were saying we thought that it's Friday, it's sunny, we're probably not going to get very many people joining us, and tonight has been one of the most well attended sessions, so we're really, really grateful for you and for your time. And so finally, just good luck. Go out there, do it. Good luck.
Yeah, definitely. And I really just want to jump in and say thank you so much to Eric and to the BKS agency, James, Jessica, Jason. James, particularly, you have been amazing with coordinating this, so thank you so, so much. Hopefully we can meet and have a I don't know, some social kind of something at some point in the future. And to everyone that's attended, don't be scared. You've got nothing to lose. Go for it. And if you want to try and connect with me on Twitter, where I complain to every single person in the world about their crap customer service, feel free to. You won't get much book information on there, but I've not got a limited resource. But if you've got questions around applications or you're struggling with stuff to do with the industry, just reach out to me and I'll help as much as I can. Keep an eye out for the FAQs, and huge thank you again. And thank you so much, Jessica, for rounding us up today.
You're very welcome.
Good weekend,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.